The NBA is expanding and everybody knows it. We have LeBron out here openly campaigning to be the new owner of one of the teams, Seattle fans begging for the Sonics to come back. The commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, has openly said that next up on the agenda for the league is to add at least 2 teams, which is a super exciting thing for the league. But you might be wondering, how does this work? Why are they doing it? Where are the teams going to go? And when is this going to happen? Well, the last time the NBA expanded was in 2002 when they added the completely cursed Charlotte Bobcats after the Hornets moved to New Orleans. The Bobcats were around for only 10 years and also put together the worst NBA team of all time before being switched back to the Hornets and the New Orleans franchise becoming the Pelicans. Prior to that, the last true expansion that we got in the NBA that's going to look similar to what we have coming up was in 1995 when the league added 2 new teams, both in Canada, the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies, who are now the Memphis Grizzlies. And when you add new teams to the league, of course, those teams need players, and you aren't just going to let them pick up anyone. So here are the rules for an expansion draft. There's no guarantee the rules are going to be the same this time, but this is what they have been in the past. During the expansion draft, the new teams would be selecting players from the rest of the NBA's active rosters. The other teams in the league would be allowed to protect up to 8 players on their roster from being drafted, but they do have to leave at least 1 player unprotected. So for example, if the expansion draft was today, the Oklahoma City Thunder, whose current top 10 players on their roster reads as some combination of SGA, Alex Caruso, Jalen Williams, Chad Holmgren, Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, the recently drafted Nikola Topic, and Isaiah Hartenstein, would have to leave at least 2 of those players unprotected in an expansion draft. Now, they and the Celtics are probably the 2 deepest teams in the entire league, so that's an extreme example, but still, that is one of the many wrinkles of an expansion draft. Teams having to choose what they want to prioritize within their roster, which brings us to another rule. Each team around the league can have at most 1 player selected from their team. So if the Thunder lost, for example, Isaiah Joe, they wouldn't be at risk of losing any other player on their roster. So just take a second to think who you would potentially look to protect or add in a NBA expansion draft. And speaking of the draft, let's talk about the first overall pick in the NFL draft, Caleb Williams, and the sponsor of today's video, Prize Picks. I have Caleb Williams on some of my fantasy teams, and I'm also putting him into my Prize Picks lineup this week with a free square. As part of that free square, he just has to get a single yard in his game this weekend, so of course he's going in there. I'm also going to put in Chuba Hubbard from my beloved Carolina team to score a touchdown, and let's put CJ Stroud passing yards in there as well. I went with more on each of those numbers, but it's just that simple on Prize Picks. You pick your players, you pick more or less on each of these numbers, and if you win some cash. Now, if it's your first time here, there are 2 things that you can do. First, you get an instant $50 anytime you play a $5 lineup. So if you put $5 in to play that lineup I just listed, you instantly get $50 on your account. And to take advantage of that as a first-time user, make sure you use code SPORTING or click the link in the description. Again, code SPORTING or the link in the description. So you can use this lineup for the Caleb Williams free square, use that code, and get $50 instantly after placing a $5 and up lineup. All that to get you started on Prize Picks today. Go have some fun, and thank you again to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. Back to the NBA expansion draft. Like I said, each of these 2 teams would be selecting from the rest of the league, and once the protected players have been chosen, the draft goes back and forth between, most likely at this point, 2 expansion teams until they have filled out their rosters a bit. Then, depending on what time of the offseason it's in, we go into the rest of things as normal, and the expansion teams are slotted into the actual NBA draft as well. Now, although the Thunder were an extreme example here, you can easily see one of the main reasons for expansion. The NBA is unbelievably talented right now. Top to bottom in terms of stars, skills, depth, you can make the argument that right now is as talented as the NBA has ever been. The Thunder are a great example. The Celtics are another one, as a talented player like Lonnie Walker is just trying to hold on to a roster spot with them. It is clear that the league can support at least 2 more teams right now. And that's really important because in the past, expansion hasn't always gone that well. I already talked about the completely awful Bobcats, but after expansion in the 90s, things got really rough. Although there was a lot of talent in the league and a lot of the late 90s classes were awesome, things fell apart a bit in the early 2000s in a way that made the league much more cautious for future expansions. A few bad draft classes like 2000 and a few more where the players either got in trouble or didn't develop the way that we hoped, like in 2002, led to a league that by the mid-2000s was very top-heavy and also wasn't a great product from a talent standpoint through the league. And that's one of the reasons why the league has been concerned about expansion for so long, why they haven't expanded since adding the Bobcats that then turned into the Hornets all those years ago. But there's another main reason that is pushing them towards expansion this time around: money. An NBA franchise, depending on the team, is worth between $3 to $5 billion, and some, like the Celtics, who are currently for sale, are projected to go for even more than that. Adding that much value to the league is obviously a huge deal. When you add new teams to the league, there is an expansion fee paid by the new franchises, and that fee is split up amongst the other 30 teams in the league. So the current teams are incentivized to vote for expansion to the tune of a check worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There's also, of course, the added value to any future TV contracts the league has, while also creating new fan bases to continue to add to league revenue for years to come. Okay, so now we know how the draft would work and why the league wants to do it. Where are the teams going to be, and when will this happen? First, the teams. As of right now, the heavy frontrunners location-wise are Seattle and Las Vegas. Seattle had the Sonics/Supersonics stolen from them when they were moved to Oklahoma City and renamed the Thunder, and in any version of expansion, it is basically a guarantee that we see these Sonics/Supersonics return to the NBA if they're able to figure out the details of having an arena to play in and all that stuff. Vegas, on the other hand, is very interesting for two reasons. One, it has been a popular place to add new teams like the Aces of the WNBA, the Golden Knights of the NHL, and the Raiders of the NFL. So there's already plenty of infrastructure in place and a ready-made fan base. And they also appear to have plans already for a possible owner. Over the past few years, publicly and privately, LeBron James has lobbied for the NBA to make him the new owner of the Las Vegas expansion team, which also aligns really well with the timeline of LeBron's career, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And there's also a precedent for this a little bit as well. The NBA gave Michael Jordan a really good deal on buying into the Charlotte franchise all those years ago, and given the publicity and the legitimacy that that would add to that franchise, you could see them doing the same thing with LeBron in Vegas. Now, this is obviously different because the Vegas team is immensely more valuable than the Charlotte team was at the time, but you can just imagine the announcement coming from the NBA saying they're expanding, adding new teams in Seattle and Vegas, and LeBron is the owner of the Vegas team. It's pretty easy to see why they would make this happen. Not a guarantee, but I feel pretty strongly that they'll work something out. Okay, so when is this going to happen? Right now, it seems like a relatively slow process and one that is probably a few years away from actually seeing a team on the floor, which also gives LeBron's career time to, actually end so he's not owning the team and then somehow playing for the team at the same time. Best guesses by insiders put a realistic date at the 2027-28 season because logistically, there's still a lot of stuff to figure out. Who's going to own the teams, where they're going to play, what arenas they're going to play in, not to mention actually having the expansion draft as well. But it seems likely that by the end of the decade, the NBA will add the Seattle Supersonics and the Las Vegas, whatever they're going to be called, as two new teams to the NBA. And at that point, we'll just kind of have to see what the domino effects are going to be. If it is Seattle and Vegas, then a team like Memphis will likely get moved to the Eastern Conference, which will have an interesting impact on the power dynamic between the conferences, and 100 other things are going to change, but I, for one, can't wait to see what the new NBA looks like. Regardless of when, where, or who, it seems like they're going to be adding two new teams, and I, for one, cannot wait to make some more content on it.